Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I don't know what it is, but when we are sitting close to a holiday, it always feels like a slightly different atmosphere. I don't know, it's sort of a relaxed or warmish. It's hard to say what that atmosphere is, but somehow the atmosphere changes a little bit and we're just sort of easy because, well, we know we can sleep late tomorrow and it's a day of no work for many people, not everyone. So we are on the midst or the eve of Independence Day, although I don't know if we know what that means anymore exactly. But so before I address the topic that I want to take up for tonight, I said last Saturday that I wanted to talk about this particular subject again because it is about Genjo Koan, what we are studying. And it also, I didn't want any misunderstanding about something that was said quite a few weeks ago now regarding how the self and activity and us in the world are. So what happened was somebody asked about compassion, and another person said, well, it isn't that compassion becomes exhausted, it's the self that becomes exhausted. We're talking about people who work in caretaking, caregiving occupations become exhausted by compassion or empathy, whatever we want to call it. And so I wanted to say that that is not a correct understanding in Zen practice. The idea that the self would become exhausted, but not compassion be exhausted, is not correct. Essentially, the self, action, and the object are completely united. There is no separation of the self, action, and the object. So if one has engaged in the action of compassion, that is not the small self acting. That is the self being acting and being compassion itself. And the object then is whoever is the recipient of that act of compassion. And those are completely united. There is no separation. Even if we think there is separation, there is no separation. And that is Genjo Koan. That is an essential aspect to understand about Genjo Koan. So supposing you're driving, even most of us don't think about the fact that I am driving down the street. We are driving. We get to a place, we turn the car, we stop, we park the car, we turn the car off, and driving is over. And there is no separation. I mean, the car doesn't continue to drive the way the idea was that, well, compassion continues. It's the self that becomes exhausted, but that compassion doesn't become exhausted. There's no separation of any of those. So the car doesn't continue to drive. The car is the object. The self and the action of driving are all one. So that's a kind of a crude example, perhaps, of what we mean when there's no separation. There's just acting in the world. This being acting in the world towards something. We sit Zazen and this is the self and the action of Zazen in the universe. The object is the totality of the universe in Zazen. So Buddha nature acting as sitting Zazen, opening to the universe. No separation whatsoever. Even if we are sitting there thinking about anything, there's still that Dharma self, Buddha self, sitting in the universe, in and with the universe. So this is the primary point to understand Genjo Koan. If we get that, we understand Genjo Koan. Genjo Koan, it's back here somewhere. So, to study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be actualized by myriad things. So this self, forgetting, is totally unified with the action of whatever it is we are doing. That is to forget the self, is to be completely the action, whatever action we are doing. If we get that, we get Genjo Koan. It's the essence of Genjo Koan, that there is no thinking self. There is the self in the activity of life, doing. And in the question of saying that compassion becomes, or one becomes exhausted in compassion, well, everything has its time, and it has that Dharma moment, and in that action, it finishes. So we don't even have to think about it as exhaustion. It simply finishes. It finishes that action and goes to something else. Everything is temporary. So we aren't generating compassion endlessly. We generate life. We are life, whatever it brings up. And the self, the action, and the object are one. It's the most important thing. And extremely important to understand in Zazen. There's no I sitting Zazen. There is this in the action, in the activity of Zazen in the universe. Okay, so I want to talk about what you may have seen as the subject of tonight's talk. And this is another poem by Wendell Berry. I came across this poem, I don't know, a week ago maybe, and it changed my sense of feeling and outlook in the world entirely. And I was deeply overcome by this. And so I wanted to share it tonight. It's called The Peace of Wild Things, Wendell Berry. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, and do not tax their lives, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. Such a master. So, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. And for so many of us right now, we are foretelling the future. We are thinking about how things are going to turn out. Well, we certainly didn't think that even a few days ago things would turn out as they did, or what tomorrow is going to turn out to be. Thinking how awful, or even maybe how wonderful too, but any of it is forethought of grief, that we will be burdened in somehow by the future, by something that's going to happen that we have no idea of. in Buddhism, it is not it is not said that we shouldn't think about the future, or that we shouldn't proclaim or predict the future. It doesn't say such a thing, because we often talk about past, present, and future, but we don't predict the future in such a way and then hold on to it and arrest it in the prediction. But we do think about the future. We are greatly responsible for the future. How we act now tells us what the future will be. So we certainly do that, but right now, our society, well, so many that I know, are busy saying, oh, it's going to be awful. This is going to be terrible. What if this happens, and what if that happens? And we are sort of obsessed a bit with the prediction of the future. And I mean, I don't know what we can do about it particularly. And go out and work on behalf of something, might make us feel better, perhaps. But this idea that do not tax our lives with forethought of grief, this comes sometimes into our popular culture. Do you remember the movie with Tom Hanks, The Bridge of Spies? Remember that movie? Mm-hmm. So in that movie, Tom Hanks is working to free up a man who was arrested. He's in prison in Russia, and Hanks is working to release a Russian spy who was in this country, and they're going to make a trade. And Hanks knows, and so does the Russian spy, knows that when he goes back to Russia, he may be a dead man. Who knows what they're going to do with him because of what he might have revealed under pressure in the United States. So Hanks is really worried about this guy and so forth and so on. And Hanks is working with him before they make the trade. And he says to him, aren't you worried about what's going to happen when you get back to Russia? I mean, it could be terrible. Aren't you worried about it? And the Russian man says, would it help? It's a great moment in that movie, because the Russian spy has been very, peaceful throughout the ordeal of all of the chaos of this trade of spies. So all of our worrying, this poem is suggesting, would it help? The idea of future grief. And so when I read this poem, the birds are singing, the trees are speaking to us, the sun is shining. I know that's not true everywhere. I know that there are hurricanes that are devastating the Caribbean right now. So that's not true that everything is peaceful everywhere. But still, what can you do until the hurricane comes? You prepare, you put up the boards, and you wait. You do everything you can and you get through. That, of course, is how we do take care of things and how we take care of the future, by taking appropriate means to care for our future, to care for ourselves, to care for our families, to care for our loved ones, our friends, our partners. Of course we do that. But beyond that, why set up our minds for grief? Would it help? I don't have much else to say about this. I the feeling is tomorrow is a holiday, fireworks over in Lacey, and people are going to celebrate with barbecues and a parade downtown. All those kinds of things are happening. So it's a kind of a celebration. And we ought to celebrate as far as we've come. In many ways, we've done okay. Many, many things that need repair, that need care, that need evolution, that need great care and so forth. But so Fletcher and I, with Steve, at Steve's invitation, on Saturday, we were there for the dedication of Stetches. I don't always get the name straight. Stetches man, 20 feet statue, about 24 feet maybe.
Probably 20, close to what on the platform.
Yeah, okay. This great statue, Stetches man, it's called. You might have seen it in our newsletter. So Stetches man is standing with his hands out, holding kind of a totem face with rope coming down with whale bones attached to the end of the strings. Holding his hands out to greet the vessels as they come into harbor. So the word Stetches is the word that is used for Bud Bay. That is the name of Bud Bay, Stetches. And I don't know, Stetches Waters or something. Mm-hmm. I don't know. We couldn't get all that information. But in any event, Stetches man is a kind of a protection statue from the Salish peoples. And so he greets people, the ships, the vessels coming into port, greets anybody coming into the harbor, and reminds us of the natives who originally lived here on this land that we now call Olympia. And it's an impressive statue, very unusual and beautiful statue that was built by Steve's family and placed on their land, but is visible from the beach at Squaxin Park, or if you go over to North Point, you will see Stetches man because he's right up there. Is the beach in front of your house public?
It is not.
Okay.
But people do walk by and
Yeah.
We don't really say anything. I mean,
Sure. Well, they don't come up the steps onto the grass area.
Exactly.
Well, we're probably going to have more of them come, and they'll probably be stepping up onto the grass is what will happen.
There was a gentleman yesterday who rode up because the tide was up, and he goes, "I've been to the Louvre, and I've never seen anything this beautiful before."
Wow.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, so I encourage you to go down onto the beach at Squaxin or North Point. But if you go to the beach at Squaxin, you'll see it be much closer to it. It's very impressive. And so there was, of course, the chanting ceremony. People came from, I didn't know any of them, but they came from the Salish nation. I don't know, maybe they were Squaxin, I don't know.
They were Squaxin, so she's Squaxin, and her husband is Squamish.
Okay.
Squamish. They're a melding of two tribes.
Sure, yeah. It was great intermarriage between the tribes, particularly in Olympia, where it seemed to be a gathering place for many of the tribes, local tribes. Mm-hmm. And so many intermarriages occurred right in this area. So it's a beautiful addition to Squaxin Park in its way, as we sort of work our way toward the city of Olympia, demonstrating the the land that was owned. And of course, the park where Juneteenth took place was named after Mrs. Howard. What's her first name? Rebecca Howard, who owned first of all, the hotel in downtown Olympia. She and her husband, the first Black people to arrive in Olympia in the late 1800s. They came from Maine, I believe, and they established a hotel in downtown Olympia. Then they sold it and they bought land on the East Bay, and they had a large farm there that they worked. And so there's more that we know about this land that gradually we are bringing forward the original peoples who lived here. And so I live on that land. You live on Squaxin Park land. I live on the land that was the Howard's land by Howard's Point. So it's wonderful to know that. So, and also wonderful then to, Stetch's man with his hands held open, welcoming and protecting. He's definitely a protecting force and a protecting spirit out there on the waters. And I guess if I could tie that together, there is this sense of not taxing the mind with forethought of grief, this openness to come in and welcome and be in a place of peace as best we can make it, is certainly the sense about Stetch's man. At least what I feel about him. So the spirit of Stetch's man. So, and you were there too, excuse me. Kirsta was there with her mother. I was honored to meet her, to meet your mother and Steve's family also.
And the road going down is public, so we can go down the road and go down to the beach by those steps. That's not ours.
Oh, right in front of your driveway? Oh.
Oh, okay. So, well, that road, yeah. Okay. All right. So you could go to Howard Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then just walk down Howard Avenue to the beach, and you'll see it. It'll be visible to you pretty quickly as you go down and come around the curve. So, yeah. I would advise not driving down there though, because no place to park and it's private property. So you would want to park on the street and then walk down.
We'd let you park at our house.
Yeah. Yeah. So I made bookmarks for you with this poem to take with you. It brought great solace to me. Those of you who are online, I will send it to you by email so that you have a copy of that poem, of this poem, The Peace of Wild Things. You can also find it easily online, The Peace of Wild Things by Wendell Berry, but I will send it to each of you so that you have it. It brought me great solace at a moment of despair. When despair for the world grows in me and I wake in the night at the least sound of fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I enter the place of the wild things. So, Steve, would you give these out? We're going to get up in a minute too, so you just pass those around. Take one. So, if anybody has anything to say, please, about this.
The idea of exhaustion is kind of interesting. We started out saying that there's no small self that gets exhausted, but it does seem that worry doesn't help others, and it exhausts us, right? And so we have less energy for what we're doing here and now.
Yes.
And we're worried about other things.
Yes, very much so. Yeah. And so if we can realize that when we are chanting, sometimes the jaw gets very tired. And yet that happened to me tonight. And so I say, But chanting, this is the action of chanting. It isn't, me being small, worrying about, my jaw is tired. Chanting is occurring, and we're pulled out of ourselves then by way of recognizing that there's just the action of what we are doing, and there's no small self acting in there. It's the self chanting in the universal world, and that's it. That's it. So we can rise above these ideas that stop us from certain things, or that cause us to resist certain activities. There's no need to. So, yeah. Yes, Simi. And
I just
yeah.
want to thank you for just a remarkably timely and purposeful and lovely poem.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's exactly what I needed.
Yeah, well, it's exactly for me too,
Very
Larry.
appreciative.
Yeah.
I'd like to, I try and be mindful that I have a personal saying that the compassion begins at home. And the idea is, I don't think it's possible to be compassionate for others, for the world, if we don't have self-compassion.
Oh, of course.
And I think that we generate that when we're mindful of just how we're feeling and how our feelings project and affect other people.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that we can be present, count our blessings, not our problems, be aware of the beauty that surrounds us. And in Zazen, we create that space of compassion. I think that's the least we can do.
Yeah. And it's a very huge thing to do at the same time. Yeah. Because we're gifting that to the world. We give it to the world. We don't sit Zazen for ourselves. It's in the universe. It's in and for the universe. So yes, Simi.
Do you have any tips, I guess, around meeting others' worry coming from others when you're holding center, and avoiding toxic positivity or invalidating their real worry and grief,
Right.
so as not to minimize very real situations there,
Yeah.
and how you meet that when you're without taking it on.
Yeah. So I was going to a situation one time where I was feeling, I don't want to go. It's going to be awful. And I certainly had those feelings about it. And I can't remember who said to me, wrap yourself in a bubble. Just put a bubble around you. And you are completely in the world, you are interacting, but things that are disturbing will bounce off that bubble. It's purely an imaginative thing, but I did it and it worked and it was fine. So I found it to be very, very helpful. Not denying myself in the world, but saying that not all empathy is appropriate either. Giving empathy out or feeling it whatever it is coming back at me, but just recognize that the universe also says that you do not have to take all of that in, and it's not appropriate to take it all in either. So I did that. I just imagined a bubble around me, and things just actually didn't come at me. They just kept bouncing off. And, certainly things that I wanted came, I could sort of open the pocket of the bubble. And I found that helpful. And it sounds like it's pushing the world away, but it was saying that, as a public person and as a teacher, it's sort of, you are subject to everybody's stuff that they throw at you, and you don't have to take it in. So that's all I could suggest. That's a tip.
Thank you.
Yeah. Maybe somebody else has some tip to work with, but it's very difficult. I mean, certainly any public person, any caregiver, anything like that, you're a target of projection. And so it's not correct that should come at you. It's not correct to receive all of it in such a way that it destroys you or causes tremendous disruption in you. It's not appropriate. So it's correct to leave it there.
Yes, I have an experience in Zen over and over where praise and blame are mentioned a fair amount in Zen, I think. And this, it's a real exercise for me in this understanding of I don't have to take in what isn't real, or neither praise nor blame in a certain circumstance alters. In other words, I must do better at being the steward of my own state of being.
Right.
So I think we practice that a lot in Zen, which helps in a lot of other circumstances as well.
Yeah, no praise, no blame. Yeah. And so that happened. Do you recall when I put in the dishwasher upstairs the wrong soap, the dish soap, and the whole kitchen was flooded with bubbles?
It was bubbles, yeah.
I did. I was the one who did it. And nobody said, "Oh, why did you do that stupid thing, Eido?" Not one person did. There were a whole bunch of us. They were trying to figure out, you were there, Jikyo, I think, trying to deal with the bubbles. It was so horrible. But nobody said, how stupid, what were you thinking? You know, and that's how we practice, because we also know that in this life we have to agree to pick up for one another. We have to do that. We have to be willing to pick up after one another. So, that's our practice. I mean, it's hard. It's hard, but I was the recipient of the no blame moment when we were, the whole kitchen, it was just putting dish soap in the dishwasher by mistake.
That was a real case of would it help? You know,
Yeah, of course, that's true.
we just had to do something.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. So, but in our personal relationships, that's a holy practice to not blame. And it's a difficult one, and it's hard to do, but it, can save marriages and can save many relationships. So, yeah, Steve.
Well, since you mentioned marriage, and this is a lesson that has taken me close to 30 years to really learn and appreciate, but whenever my wife was full of angst and anger or whatever, she would need to vent, and she would come to me, and I would try and solve the problem, or I would say something to try and make it better, or I was the problem solver. But that's not what she wanted. She wanted me just to listen and not say anything. And so when you just listen, you don't have to take it all in. You can just be present. And boy, it's amazing when you learn just to be present when that's coming at you, because there were times when I felt like, she's almost attacking me, but that's not the case. She just needed to get out whatever it was that was causing all that.
Sure. That is that case, but there's also the same kind of thing where somebody wants you to get mad for them, get angry for me. So they will vent, and if you don't get angry, they're more angry because you're not getting angry for them. So it's a tricky one,
How do you deal with that?
Then you really don't engage. You just don't engage. When you know that that is what the activity of that person is doing to you, is trying to make you angry for them, then you really have to stand back and not take it. Or you could just say, I feel like you want me to be mad for you. You could just say that too if you think that. Because that can happen frequently. So, there's a little haiku poem by Isa. We walk on the roof of hell amid flowers. Something like that. Something like that. Yeah. Anybody online want to say anything at all? Okay, all right.